I hit record just now. It's Thursday, July 10th, 2025. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is the GeekNights Book Club. Tonight we are talking about Everything for Everyone, an oral history of the New York Commune, years 2052 to 2072.
So way back in, middle school, right? We were required to have a foreign language course, and there were only a few choices. And I chose Spanish because it felt like it would be more useful.
I chose French for the sole reason of, because we live near the border of Canada and we had a lot of Canadian goods, a lot of them were in English and French, so I encountered French more often in my daily life as a kid.
The people who chose French did get to go, I forget what year of school, but they did get to go on a field trip to Montreal at some point. And the people who chose Spanish did not get...
What, they didn't get to go to Tijuana or Madrid?
Did not get a Latin American field trip or a Spain field trip. That did not happen.
That's a shame.
We didn't even get a Corona New York field trip. But anyway, so I did it for 3 years in middle school. And then in high school, right, they were like, oh, you guys, you really got to do the you should do it really 4 years. Otherwise, colleges will hate you and they won't let you in. And I'm like, what's the minimum required to graduate high school?
For us, it was 2 years of it. You had to do 2 years.
2 years. So I did 5 years of Spanish, 3 middle school, 2 high school. And then I'm like, I'll do computer classes and study hall and anything else instead because I'm not speaking Spanish to anybody. I wasn't bad at it. I didn't hate it, but it was just like, I would rather do computer class, obviously.
I mean, junior and senior year of high school.
I want to make room on my schedule for something else,
My goal was as little school as possible. Like my senior year, I didn't have a class like 7th or 8th period because I pulled shenanigans. I just left.
Yeah. And so time went on, and then eventually it was like, oh, it'd probably be useful if, it's like I can kind of read signs in Spanish on the subway.
Yep.
Living in New York City, right? And then, the population of people who, even though the world population wise, it would be much more convenient to speak, English, obviously, great.
Yep.
I got lucky, but Chinese would be Hindi, something like that, right? But that's not happening. So, or since I'm a nerd, Japanese, Korean, obviously useful. to learn those. That's not happening. So, it's like, I already know some Spanish. If I could just finish off the Spanish to where I can actually talk to another human being, that would be useful because I live in New York. I could, Latin America is reachable. And also, in my current job, we actually have I have a ton of coworkers in Argentina. There's basically we have some kind of a contract with a company down there, and basically a bunch of their employees are effectively our employees. We treat them like they're our employees. We don't even treat it like they're contractors, and they're all speaking English to varying degrees, and I'm like, it's not really fair, is it?
Yeah.
And so I went to El Bujo Verde, right, the green owl. And the green owl, the green owl gets a bad rap, some deservedly and some not deservedly, right?
That owl got me back to where I left off when I graduated high school pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yep. And so I went with the green owl, and it's like, hey, since I already knew some stuff, that really helped. If I started from nothing, I think it would have been really bad to go with the Duolingo, right? But because I already knew something, it was like, okay, I'm learning, I'm enhancing my vocabulary, I'm practicing all the, it's like, okay, we're going. But, I had doubts with the Duolingo. It didn't, even though I learned a bunch, and I can read actually fairly well. Reading is the easiest. I didn't have the confidence to speak to another person because it's is the way that what Duolingo is teaching you, I'm like, is that the way people really talk?
Yeah. Right.
It's like, if I talk like that to someone, am I going to sound like a dumbass, right? Am I going to say something wrong or bad, or am I it can't tell you your pronunciation is right. There's so many things. And so I did what other people I knew do. I finally went and said, all right, I'll go find a Spanish speaking teacher to video conference with.
I mean, Emily does that once a week with a Japanese instructor. It's fantastic.
Same thing. And I'm like, you know what? And because my coworkers are mostly, the Spanish-speaking coworkers are mostly in Argentina, I'll find a person in Argentina so I know that I'm speaking, because there's variants, right? It's like I'll get closer to their variant because that's the one that I would use. And if I have to speak to someone even from Spain, which would be the most different, or Mexico, it's like they'll still be able to understand me, right? It's like, if an Argentinian coworker goes to Mexico, you think they can't communicate? It's like, no, they're fine, right? It's like, so as long, I'll do it that way. And so I don't want to promote the website where I found the person, but it's one of those websites where you can basically search through a bunch of people and find, plenty of language teachers. And it worked out pretty well. And I found, I was looking through all these people and there were all these different kinds of characters. And I found an old, I don't know, he's not that old, right? But older than me, beardy guy with a bunch of comic books on the shelf behind him. And I'm like, that's the guy.
That feels like the guy.
That's the guy. And it was the guy. It was the right guy. He's like, and all the things that I highly recommend it, basically, if you really want to learn a language and have confidence. And I've only had 1.5 lessons, the trial lesson and one real one, right? It's like the confidence to actually use the language and not, be concerned that what you learn from a book or from an owl is not correct. It's like, oh, okay. He's like, yeah, I'm like, the thing that bothers me a lot is when there's synonyms, right? In English, you might know when to use the word start and when to use the word begin and when to use the word commence, right? But if you're learning English, how would you know when to use start and when to use begin, right? And it's if someone used them at the wrong time, it might make sense. If they use them at the right time, it might, right? And so, but in Spanish you have comenzar and empezar, which both mean start, right? And I can't ask the owl which one do I use when. The owl doesn't teach you that, right? But I asked the old bearded guy, and he's like, yeah, use whichever one. It's like, oh, okay.
Well, think about in English how rare, there aren't good rules for when to use synonyms in that situation.
Exactly, but that's the kind of value I think that if anyone out there wants to learn the language, you've got your owl streak really high. Yeah. I would recommend
a proper streak, not you did the one you got 5 points every day at 11:59.
No. My streak, the way I do the owl is basically the halfway method, right? You got the monthly medal. You got to get the monthly medal. If you don't get the medal for the month, you didn't do anything. You just cheated, right? So I do tons of lessons in the month until I get the medal. And once I get the medal, then I do one practice just to get the fire, just to carry the fire over to the next one. Right? So it's, but yeah. That's what I gotta say about
the thing that I remember in high school that was, my school, I went to a relatively fancy public school for reasons. So our school had French, Spanish, and German, the 3 defaults in most schools. They also had Russian and Japanese and Mandarin. And I really, 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 for obvious reasons, wanted to take Japanese. And everybody wanted to take Japanese. All the weebs did. The Japanese class was only scheduled at one time during the day, and it conflicted with the advanced science classes. So you had to choose Japanese or an actual science class instead of the garbage class that all the regular students were in. And Russian conflicted with the marching band. And so anyone who wanted to learn Russian couldn't be in the marching band. So that was a big part of why I picked French.
Yep. Anyways, but I guess to make it relevant to the book club, I think I could maybe read a book in Spanish. Right? Should I pick Don Quixote in Spanish, a book that was originally in Spanish, and that Rim wouldn't be able to read it that easily? I don't know how easily it would be for me to read it either, but I kind of want to try.
Nah, we could pick a small. You want to. You were.
You want read See Spot Run, Dr. Seuss in Spanish?
We should read Movement Troll.
I don't speak that language.
You read it in Spanish, I read it in French, and we see how we go.
Oh, okay. El Señor Movement.
But anyway, things of the day, because we're diving right into the Geek Nights Book Club in a second. So I like this. I found this cute little animation. It's got 170,000 views, so I'm glad for that, because this is so simple. It is such a simple, like MS Paint looking animation, and yet it conveys what it is trying to convey so perfectly and purely. If any of you have ever had a dog in your house, it's a common thing where the dog's happy living in the house, got a backyard, dog goes outside. But if the front door is somehow open and unattended for even a microsecond, that dog has somehow gotten through it and is running down the street away from your house as fast as possible. This happened a few times in my childhood. It happened to many of our friends. And I'm glad I'm not the only one who has a memory of that so crystallized in their brains. Also, the end evokes, in a tiny way, one of my other favorite short animations, Space Wolf.
Yeah. Well, a very old thing of the day, Space Wolf. All right. So there's a person, Edward Tufte, who is like a world-renowned, is still alive, by the way, expert on information design, graphs, charts, etc.
How to convey information.
Right. And his books that he has published have sort of this distinctive font where it's like, it's not an outlandish font. It's like, but it's, you can definitely, like, whenever you pick, it's like, you can know it's a book that he's done. Yeah. All right. That you don't have to look at the byline to know that he wrote the book, because as soon as you open it, you see that font and you just know. Right. And so that font is Bembo, right? It's some kind of Bembo font. And when they translated the Bembo font to the computer from print, they kind of effed it up, and it wasn't right. And so then later on, Tufte and some other people corrected that, and then some guy named Adam Schwartz converted that into a web font, so you could actually make web pages with the font.
Oh, and I like how the website explains exactly what they fucked up, because it's very similar to what happens with 8-bit, pixel games and CRTs. The font was designed for typewriters, and it was thin and spindly on purpose because the ink would always spread a little bit from the impact, and just the way ink works.
Whoever made the font copied, the tiles, whatever they're called, from the letterpress.
Yep.
And they should have been copying the ink on the paper when they.
So it's exactly like playing an old pixel game, but it's blocky because you left out what the CRT would have done to it.
But anyway, you can just get there's a free, openly licensed version of the font here. You could just download at this link, right? And they got a GitHub, and now you can use this font on web pages or documents or what have you. I love to do a font thing of the day now and then.
Also, if you're not familiar with Edward, you should check out his works. I reference them and a different guy, Stephen Few, who himself heavily references Tufte or Tuft. Yeah. I've heard both. I actually don't know what the correct pronunciation.
It's Tufte, and the reason I know that is because before the show, I went on Wikipedia, and for his Wikipedia page, and there's one of those little speaker icons.
And you clicked on it.
Names. You can click on it and hear the pronunciation, so it's Tufte.
Nice, because I have a Tufte book and a Stephen Few book on my desk at work, and I actually reference.
I had like a Tufte pamphlet, basically, that some professor at RIT forced upon us, which is the first time I heard of this guy.
I find Stephen Few's stuff to be a little more practical for like digital modern design stuff, but Tufte has more like good theory in it.
Yeah.
Anyway, digressing. So the GeekNights Book Club book, Everything for Everyone, an oral history of the New York Commune, 2052 to 2072. Now, I want to preface this because we've read the book. If you're not familiar with the GeekNights Book Club somehow, then we're going to assume you read the book. We're not going to explain everything that happened in this book. So I'd suggest you read it. And if you haven't read it, you should check out the GeekNights Book Club, because we've done Geek Nights for almost 20 years. There's a decent number of book clubs in there where if you find a book on the list, you can read it with the guarantee that once you finish reading it, there's like an hour-long Geek Nights episode where we talk about it. So that's what a book club is.
Also, you should read more books. That's good for brains. It makes you, you can really, like, you know, they say don't judge a book by its cover, but I judge a person by whether they read books or don't read books.
I have encountered two different people in my life who ended up being very bad people who both.
If you meet a person who reads books, the odds of them being a decent, interesting, person are way high.
It's like plus 10 to the roll.
If you meet a person who is like, you know, even someone who reads books rarely, it's like, all right, you know, they're not going to, but if you find a person who like does not read, is against, like tries to avoid reading, uses the Cliff Notes in high school, like has never, a no book person, the odds of them being shitty are very, very high. And, you know, the people who have read a book, read a book once in a while, but it's not their hobby or whatever, those people, you know, are basically the baseline. Right?
Yep. So this book is interesting because I have complex thoughts on it, more so than I expected to having read it. So I want to be very clear up front with that there are good elements to this book, but there were very frustrating elements, which I feel like we're going to dwell on. So I kind of want to lead with what we liked about the book and what I engaged with positively before I go off on my modernity rant.
My overall feeling, right, is it's like there's something that there are things that I often want people to do. I'm like, oh, how come no one ever does this? How come no one ever makes Pokemon MMO? How come no one ever did, right? And so this book is a perfect example of someone doing something that I've asked for quite a few times, but they did it a little
Yep.
Right? And it's like, oh, you did what I wanted, but a little
Yep. And it's always like we stopped reviewing video games and board games a long time ago where we just didn't like them at all. Like if they were just bad, we kind of just didn't bother reviewing them. And the most frustrating thing in reviewing a tabletop game, an area where we actually have some expertise, is games that are almost great but have a flaw that is too deep to ignore. Yep. That is so much worse than something that's just bad.
Right. It's like, that's the thing, is like people could get the wrong impression about how much you like or dislike something. Cause like there'll be things where I complain like a ton about how you're so angry. And it's like, if I'm super angry about something, it doesn't mean I hate it or think it's garbage. It means that like a whole bunch of it is good. And there is some annoying flaw in it that is just really like, I had a beautiful cake and someone squirted like poop flavor.
Yep. Or I had a really good time playing Hellas, and then I ran into an unresolvable mechanical problem 100% of the times I played it.
If something is just absolute garbage, I'm not going to be angry about it. I'm just going to be like,
Yeah.
But the thing I'm angry about is not the thing I hate more. The thing that's absolute garbage is the thing I hate more. Right? So here, the thing that this book does that I really like is, in the world of science fiction, right? Most often we see dystopias.
Yep.
Right? You got either your Brave New World kind, right? You got your 1984 kinds. You got there's Mad Max kinds. There's so many kinds of dystopias, you know, cyberpunk kinds of various flavors, but it's always a dystopia. Play gods, right? So they invented the horrible technology, Terminator, and there was Skynet, and it was bad, right? And I'm like, you know, it's like Ray Bradbury that we did a very long time ago book club.
Almost all those short stories
story
are in Golden Apples of the Sun are just like, here's a way you're all fucked.
Right. If I remember correctly, one of those short stories was about like robot drones basically policing and surveilling people, right? And of course it was bad. At least I think that's where that story was from. And it's like, and I'm always saying something like, hey, you could write a story where it's fiction, right? Nothing's stopping you.
Yep.
It might not be that interesting or good, but you could write a story where like, hey, what if someone programmed surveillance police drones, but programmed them with like actually a decent sense of justice, and it worked?
You know what that is? That's The Culture series by Ian M. Banks. Kind of literally.
I'm just saying, right? That's the one, right? But it's like, and they didn't fuck up and do bad things, right?
Well, The Culture did fuck up, but they learned their lessons to get better.
Yes, sure. And this book is sort of one of those, right? It's like it's about a future where things are in many ways better. The values of that future are just better. They're the correct values. They're the values I mostly 90% share, right? Yep. And it's like, here's a future Earth in which the majority of the people who populate that Earth share the values you have, rather than the Earth we live in where not enough people have those values. And so
I do agree.
Like,
it is important to have books that explore, could things be better? Because otherwise you're not going to seed those ideas across broader society. And I think it's very easy for well-read people to get deeply cynical. I mean, look at us.
Yeah,
exactly. But
the other thing about this book is that the way they've structured it, right, is sort of interesting, but also sort of
artifice.
It feels to me like a little cheat code for the authors, right? So to make it easy to make this book.
Yeah.
So
I'm interviewing you. If there's any inconsistencies in what happens, well, this is an interview. Like maybe someone misremembered something. Sure.
Right. Yeah, sure. But it's not just that. It's that there's the two authors of this book, Emmy O'Brien.
Yep. And Eman Abdelhadi.
O'Brien and Eman Abdelhadi, right? Are two real people. Those are the two real authors, right? And so they collectively, between them, imagined the future of Earth, right, in a certain history. And then I think it appears, because they are characters in the book. They are the actual real world people, are authors, are characters in the book who are interviewing fictional characters in the future. And each chapter is one of the two authors interviewing a fictional person. So I'm pretty sure each of these authors wrote half the chapters.
Now, talk about a fun way, talk about a fun RPG. Like that's
right. It's definitely like an RPG mechanism. They imagined a world, and then they're like, okay, you imagine 6 people who live in the future between the years 2052 and 2072, and I'll imagine 6 people, and then we'll pretend that we're interviewing them like solo RPG, and then that will give 6 interviews each, 12 chapters. How many chapters? I think it's 12, right?
I forget
the exact. I think it's 12. I didn't count. And then that'll be a book, right? And the early interviews are people who are closer to 2052, and the later interviews are 2072. So we cover the 20-year history. And so that's a clever mechanism. But like I said, it feels like sort of a writing, cheat code to sort of have this
especially
sort of
because
interview
the chapters are barely related to each other, and they don't feel like they fit into the same world.
Right. It's the thing that's in common between the chapters is some of the major historical events. Some small items are mentioned across chapters. And I guess the big thing is that the world has shifted, especially in New York, right, to one in which these values are a certain set of values are now shared by most of the people, at least the ones in the societies where the people being interviewed are.
Yep. Which this is, and I'll save this for later, but it imagines a society that is, I would characterize the way anarcho-syndicalists and anarcho-communists describe what they want. And to be fair, I want a lot of the same things.
That's what I'm saying.
Like think about Preservation Ox in Murderbot. I would rather live there than anywhere in the corporation rim, even if it's not perfect.
Of course.
Obviously.
Go ahead.
But the thing about this book too is it's not just a, utopia, or at least better instead of worse, like future, like rejecting the dystopian storytelling in science fiction, but it's an apocalypse story. And even rarer are stories about the world getting better after an apocalypse. It's usually the world is now permanently apocalyptic and getting worse.
That's right.
And I think it's very important because people really often, I think, sort of misunderstand the nature of an apocalypse, because that word does not mean the end of the world. It means the end of a world as a people in society know it. Arguably, the fall of Rome was an apocalypse that reshaped the world dramatically. The fall of the Holy Roman Empire.
It's slower than the Skynet one.
Yeah, but apocalypses actually tended to be pretty slow unless it was caused by like an asteroid or something.
Judgment Day. Judgment Day. One day. We can't go faster than that.
But I think it is very important because apocalypses do happen. The history of Earth and the history of humanity is a series of apocalypse from which we recover and hopefully make a world better than the one that was destroyed along the way. Because a world being destroyed could be a society being reimagined. And this book purports to be, here's a vision of if the apocalypse that in the real world we all see coming and are living through now hits its natural conclusions, what would a better world look like that we could potentially build from the ashes?
And that's nice to think about.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of the things, a lot of the ideas and social systems that you see in the book are possible and I would approve.
Yeah.
And some people, or at least would be better for some people, if not for all people. Or, it's a lot of it is not just that the values are right. It's that, like, yes, communal child rearing would be nice.
I mean, Emily and I, we talk a lot, we keep diving deep into writing about the impacts of modernity, and the idea of a creche, not a terrible idea. Like, there's a lot of good research and literature around those topics, but this is where this book is deeply frustrating, because reading it presents a pretty good future in every little section, and I'm not even picking an example because every chapter kind of went the same way. And then, as it's describing it, I'm thinking, all right, but what about XYZ problems that I know exist in the real world?
Right.
And every time the book points out, oh, but what about problem X? The book joined me and it's like, okay, but what do we deal like in the creches? What do we do about abusers or the communes with the guns? What do we do about like who has guns or not? Like how do we deal with problem? But then every single time, without exception, the book basically has the person being interviewed say something to the effect of, we eventually solved that problem and they never address it again. Every hard problem. It's like this book studiously avoids interrogating any actually hard problem and focuses solely on the fantasy of what if we just solved that problem along the way. And that was deeply, deeply frustrating, considering that these problems are front of mind, like central problems to the concepts of anarcho-communism.
Right. Normally, when you get a sci-fi or a fantasy or any kind of fiction, other people are always like, oh, how is that? And meanwhile, there's a wizard right there, right? And they're like, oh, how is that possible? And like, there's a wizard right there. It's like, and you're complaining your disbelief, right? But here is the occasion where I have to actually agree that yes, we can criticize this book because it is purporting itself to take place in this world, the world we live in. It's not taking place in some fantasy world with fantasy people.
Chunksman said in our neighborhood in Queens in the year 2052.
Right. They didn't even put in Mary Sue's. They put themselves in. They're imagining themselves being alive and still interviewing these people in decades from now. And it's like, you're purporting this to be the real world that has a history that matches the real world so far and is only different, imagining going forward, then it's going to be really hard for me to just suspend my disbelief in pretty much anything that is anything unrealistic just isn't going to work.
And the thing is,
made a fantasy world.
That's where
the Dispossessed and Ursula K. Le Guin. It's like you could imagine, an anarcho-communist fantasy, other planet, other society, and then suddenly, if you did that, I wouldn't hold you to that standard of it's not realistic.
Even if it could be
on Earth in New York in 2052. I have now suddenly you've.
No, it could be.
You must be real.
I would have been fine with it being a full-on fantasy. Like I was willing to accept space elevator nonsense. Even like, let's go. Cyborg implant, boat party raves.
You could do it if you introduce some fantasy element. You could be like, oh yes, in 2052, someone discovered magic. In 2052, there were vampires. In 2052, there was aliens came. And then suddenly, it's like, okay, you're still on Earth in New York in 2052, but because you introduced a supernatural element, now it's okay, it's fiction. But because they did not do that, I have to hold the book to the standard of reality.
But my deepest problem, even if I give that a pass and ignore the practical reality of you can't just build a space elevator like that, or magic technology to let anyone carry a child to term regardless of how their body was born, is not going to exist in that form in the year 2052. Yeah, they're just like, oh yeah, we solved that problem. Anyone can gestate. It's like, wait, back up a little bit, because that is like one of the most foundational societal challenges.
Kindergarten Cop?
I mean, sure.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't Kindergarten Cop. What was the Arnold movie where he made a baby?
Oh, it was, oh, fuck. Yeah, for some reason, when you said Kindergarten Cop, all Arnold movies that aren't Terminator blur together into one. It was...
Junior.
There was Junior, as opposed to
1994.
Twins, which is about the gene splice between him and Danny DeVito. Anyway, Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. I think I've seen all of them, but
most of them.
I think I've seen literally every Arnold Schwarzenegger movie.
There might be obscure ones you haven't seen.
But even if I give all of that 100% pass, yeah, magic baby space elevator, AI algae, fucking let's go. The reality of the social situations they set up also doesn't pass muster. And this is where I have to bring in my knowledge of anarcho-communism and anarchists and anarchic theory, because I have found in my entire life that people who strongly believe in those ideals do the same thing in their own academia. Like, they studiously skip over hard problems to focus on the destination. But at the same time, a big part of these social movements is the idea of praxis and the idea of what are the steps toward that future. But there's a deep disconnect between saying that and then all the writing around the topic. And many of the example ideas that come up in this book really seem to assume that all the humans involved will broadly act in good faith. It assumes that expert knowledge is actually accessible, available, and able to be used by all humans, and that the only thing holding people back is academia keeps it locked up in an ivory tower, and capitalism hides it from you, and if we just had access to that information, anyone could run the space elevator. Like, I'm running the space... One of the interviews is like, I'm running the space elevator now. I didn't have any special training, but I learned it because academia was destroyed, which leads to... early on, it talks a lot about, like, oh, the LAPD, and, like, they're one of the villains, and, like, the militaries of the world, and the capitalists, and, like, great, sure. But the book multiple times casts the concept of academia and the concept of systematized expert knowledge in the same deeply negative light, conflating the ravages of capitalist society with the concept of experts.
Yeah, it's not just experts, right? It's also industry. And I think this is something...
Oh my God, we spun up the chemical plant and now we're making drugs. Like, that's not...
Right. But it's not just, the knowledge and the materials and the supply chains and logistics of operating industry, right? It's this core thing that... we keep talking about things like, basic universal income and, having a life of leisure and a social safety net and all these things. And it's like, yeah, obviously I support very strong social safety nets and human rights for anyone, even if they're unable to work, can't work, etc. Right? However, people have to... there's a line that you cross when you go from democratic socialism to anarcho commune whatever.
Well, and I'd say anarcho whatever, because there are like 100 flavors of this, and they are all pretty academically bankrupt in my personal opinion.
Right. It's like you go. I'm far to the left, but if you go too far to the left, right, and you fall off the cliff,
well, that's not left anymore. I was about to say that's not left. That's down.
Right. It's like the reality is that in order for society to operate, unless we achieve the perfect utopia where robots do all the work and humans don't have to do jack shit at all ever, and there's infinite energy from some Dyson sphere or something, right?
Yeah. Why is a fucking society that is suffering the ravages of climate change doing space shit?
Right. And it's like, if you don't go that far to the Dyson sphere, robots do all the work, AI isn't evil and does all the work level. If you're not at that level, the reality is humans have to do labor, right? In order for society to have things that aren't just like, whatever you scavenged in the fucking woods. Someone has to work. Someone has to go be the hunter. Someone has to make your iPhone. Someone has to build the space elevator. Or someone has to cut down trees, and someone has to go in a mine. And people have to do work, right? And Reem, you mentioned the knowledge. Somebody has to study, right? You don't just get knowledge because you got access to it. You have to do hard work to gain knowledge and practice and build skills.
It is worse than that. It is deeper than that.
People, somebody has to do something in order for society to function at this advanced industrial level. A lot of people have to spend time in their limited lives doing something they do not want to do. Right? If people only do what they feel like doing in a life of leisure and what they want to do and what makes them happy, we will be very diminished, right? It'll be like a dark age because no one will be growing enough food or anything. And so whether it's, I'm not capitalist, we're anti-capitalist, but you need some system. And I want to say what the system is. The system we have right now is do it or we won't give you money and you'll starve. That's not an appropriate system. Yep. I'm not defending that system, but we need some system to motivate, encourage, and hopefully not force people to do things they do not want to do. And this world portrayed in Everything for Everyone is a world in which everyone can do what they feel like doing. Nobody's doing anything they don't want to do. And yet there is abundance of high industrial level for everyone. And it's like, who's doing all that? Who's working in the chemical factory on purpose for fun?
The abundance part of that,
not believe that
is what really bothered me, because fundamentally this book amplifies the thought process that I have seen in every anarchist I've ever interacted with my entire life, both online and in person. And it is this, on one hand, they reject modernity as a concept, which fine, you can reject modernity, but a lot of the things that exist in the world cannot be made by individual humans. They are products of.
It will be a diminished society. It'll be like, 18. Where are you going to get your vaccines? You're going to die, right? It's like,
no, if you read this book, someone's just making those vaccines in their backyard with a committee in a Discord server.
Totally safe and distributing them around the world rapidly and in large quantities, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
But it's that modernity implies that modernity unlocks the ability for humanity to do things that humans cannot do. And this book and anarchy in general,
good luck. GPUs, good luck.
I think it often comes from a point of ignorance, which I'll get to in a minute. Anarchists tend to basically believe we can reject modernity because there's a different way to get the same results. Because what they're actually mistaken about, we should reject capitalism. We should reject a lot of the ways our society is organized, but modernity is just a tool that already exists. Modernity you can drive the levers of modernity any way you want if you just agree to, but modernity and systematized knowledge are the only ways to get the products of modernity. And they don't understand the difference between the tool and the person using the tool, or the person deciding who or how to use the tool.
Right. So there's the means of production, right? We're producing wealth, right? The problem is that we've produced vast wealth and we have not shared the wealth.
We give it to like 1,000 humans, most of whom are white.
We need to share that wealth equitably. But what you cannot suggest, or at least you could suggest it as long as you accept that that's what you're suggesting, right, is to demolish the means by which that wealth is produced, to reduce the amount of wealth, right? If you can seize the means of production, right, so that everyone is getting their value from it. But if you dismantle the means of production, and now there is going to be less production.
But that is where this book
for everybody
is so frustrating, because it every chapter is like, here is a modern structure we demolished. Yada, yada, yada. We still have the fruits of that structure, but we have a different structure. And they don't explain what that structure is.
Right. It's like,
It's very fantastical, but every piece of the book is like that. Like, oh, we don't have universities anymore. Knowledge is distributed and shared, and they don't really interrogate that. But I went back, I was looking for it because it was a line right near the end of the book where right here, they're talking about getting rid of the concept of money forever. And they basically, they complain about the idea of generalized human interactions. And that last interview really felt like the author speaking directly to the audience about, hey, we need to really burn down the system and do things differently. But it basically, I'm trying to find the exact line, it basically says the concept of a generalized interaction like money or any form of generalization is bad and dehumanizing, period. Okay. And
then you can't. You can live in a place like that, and you just won't have nice things.
Generalizing, is how you allow for specialization and how you have a world where not every human has to be able to do everything and have a direct relationship with all the other humans that can do the things they can't do themselves.
Now, you could suggest an alternative, right, to money, but it has to. You have to actually suggest one. You can't. You have to be like, oh, this is how we will get people to spend a life studying, practicing, working, specializing, laboring, distributing, right? You have to actually explain those details if you purport your world to be actually New York City in 2052. If you purport to be Planet X, then I wouldn't even question.
We can't ever let the commodity form or the state or any of it to ever come back. We have to remember what generalized exchange does to people. Generalized exchange is one of the most powerful tools humans have ever invented.
Right. Now they could have gone down the road where, like, yes, it's people are living, in this world, and you don't have a space elevator, you can't go to space, you can't have a supercomputer, and it's people are living in a more simple,
if this has been a degrowth, isolated commune society, that's a little more plausible, but it's not. It implies that this worked at the global scale.
Lives in kibbutzes now, and we grow our own food, and we still have the technology left over from the past, but it's like it still works. We repair old cars like in Cuba, and computers still work. And
but no, it's like now anyone can go to space.
It's like no. It's like even if we distributed the wealth of the capitalism we have, not everyone could go to space. Right. And there's no way with people not being forced to labor or encouraged to labor in some way that you're going to get more people to go to space.
But even beyond that, even if you ignore that aspect of it. It portrays over and over again. One, it's interesting that it portrays the violence of the revolution and really underlines how necessary that was. But then it doesn't portray any of the bad things that might happen after the revolution. It almost treats it like, oh yeah, we had to kill a bunch of people to make it happen, and now everything's great.
They did. That's the thing. It's like they didn't portray it as the whole thing was beautiful, right? It's sort of like, yes, these are the troubled times, and there's there are still troubles, right? It never portrays everything as perfect in a flawless utopia. It's always like, yes, here are these big troubles we started going through. We had to fight the U.S. Army, we had to kill the Fash, and we had to fight the cops, and we had to, do all the rich people ran away, and we had to do and it's like, and it's felt sort of like by acknowledging that there was a difficult path that, and not just saying it was rosy. It's like, oh yeah, see, we got there because we acknowledged all these difficult things.
But now we're here and all these problems are solved because anarchism is the way.
You acknowledged some problems you acknowledged that it wouldn't be just a beautiful, perfect thing, but just because you acknowledge that doesn't mean that it's still a complete puzzle, right? It's like you only put part of the puzzle together.
And it really shies away from how any of this is organized. The book avoids really talking about, what do you do about a person who happens to be a piece of shit? What do you do about him? And the book just kind of ignores that and just assumes, oh, everyone found a place. And all the communes are fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the way they organize, we have committees upon committees upon committees and a big global hub and a big global Remember the drama of running the zero stakes RIT anime club? We had to get 5 nerds to agree to something. Where the stakes were 0.
But meanwhile, they convinced farmers upstate to just bring enough food down to New York City for everyone to eat.
Oh, never mind the fact that it is literally impossible to run an industrial farm without a world-spanning supply chain. And this isn't even a modern problem.
I'm sure that person driving the food truck every day just loves doing that. They're just going to keep doing that when they don't have to, and there's no money to make them do it.
And we have historical precedent. The Bronze Age collapse was the same thing, and that wasn't even modern. The supply chain of running Bronze Age society in all of Europe and North Africa, once like you couldn't get certain ore from one part of the world to another part of the world, the entire global society collapsed over that.
Yep.
And it didn't recover.
So I think we've harped on this enough, right? But I think the thing is, fundamentally, the values held by the people, the fictional people, those are mostly like my values, right? It's like it's a more communal society. It's, they don't care about, their own gender or race or anything like that, right?
Yep. I love the little bits where they
a lot more kumbaya, and it's like, if we actually got rid of the fash in New York, right? It's like, culturally, socially, it would be like that. I think regardless of what our systems are, just the way people interact with each other, the way people treat each other, in a neighborly fashion, right? Is I think you could have, it wouldn't obviously. You mentioned the anime club, but you could have committees that weren't, committees now in the city. You get some crazy yokel coming up saying conspiracy theories. It wouldn't be quite like that, right? It would be a little better.
Yeah. And that was almost portrayed well, because early in the book it has that thing around the cybernetic implant rave VR parties, and that was all cool with the barges.
Yeah.
And the follow-up bit,
visions of things that exist in this world that are things that regardless of the systems around them, those things could exist, and I would love for those things to exist.
And even the idea of the organizers of the conventions, because we do see that too. Like MagFest, as an example, is an institution that appears every year and happens. And it appears because there's a bunch of people who want to make it happen and labor to make it happen despite capitalism, not because of capitalism. And if we had a societal will, we could make something like MagFest happen that is a week-long convention to debate what is our proposal to make a part of society better.
Right. But MagFest, even though its organization could happen, all that, the social part of it could happen, right? The MagFest depends upon, right? It's a music festival.
Yep.
It's like, where do amplifiers come from? Yep. Where do guitars come from? Where do video games come from?
It depends upon modern societal structures. Case in point, when a shitty person punches
all the food to feed all those people come from? Who's cleaning, making sure all the toilets operate so that MagFest doesn't end up in a poop pile?
When a drunk weirdo shows up without a badge, someone has the authority to forcibly remove them from the venue.
Yep. So the venue exists and has people cleaning it, right? If someone ruins the bathroom at MagFest, someone cleans it.
We could definitely
cleaning that toilet in everything for everyone.
Now we could definitely have a structure where people do all the work necessary to make something like that happen. However, I do not believe an anarchic structure is capable of operating anything of the level of complexity of MagFest, let alone a commune or a society.
Yeah. All right. So I think that, this book, I think if you've already read it, you've already read it.
Yeah.
If you haven't read it already, should you read it? I mean, maybe.
I would honestly say, if you're interested in these ideas, learn about anarcho-communism. And I'm not endorsing anarcho-communism. I have a pretty negative opinion of it, but at least learn about it.
Just regular communism is much better.
Yeah. Just learn about socialism, learn about social movements, learn about organizing, but more importantly, learn about the organizing in local communities, because organizing principles exist irrespective of the structures around them. And we're in a world right now where you've got to organize locally.
Right. And, I guess, this book is probably not popular enough to attract any kind of attention, right? But, something that, is just slightly a concern is that, if you put I'm not saying don't publish books, right, or ban books. That's right, obviously. But if right-wing nut job type people or even centrist people can see something like this and be like, oh, see, this is what the socialists are asking for, this crazy nut job stuff, right? And just try to wield it in the media environment as a weapon, right? When that's not what, right, to attack people who are just like a little to the left by it's like someone on the far left exists as a straw man for someone who's a little to the left. Right?
Well, the thing is, I'm on the far left, but like, well, the far left still implies there's a society.
Right. But you might say, Scott, but didn't you just say that the people who are a little to the right are fascists? And it's like, actually, yes. Right? It's like the people who are a little to the right, and it's like, well, you're using the white supremacists as a punching bag for slightly conservative guy. And it's like, yeah, but actually, have you seen slightly conservative guys wants the exact same policies?
Yep.
Right? The slightly to the left person doesn't want the exact same policies as the far to the left person. And that's the difference.
Yep. Well, a really good example. I think nuclear power is necessary and should exist in our world, at least for now.
Well, the technology we have now, right today,
but
what other answer we got?
I don't want a random commune building the nuclear power plant and running it. You need a juggernaut on the scale of a national government to run something like that.
Yep.
Systematized expert knowledge.
Some other newer, different idea that's feasible.
But that idea fundamentally entails systematized and genericized interactions at scale, which implies not necessarily a societal hierarchy, but a hierarchy of decision making. And the principles of this book intersect heavily with anarchism, which rejects the concept of a hierarchy for any purpose, even perfectly benign, valuable purposes that don't imply a social hierarchy. Like, imagine a cooperative factory where the person running the strategy gets paid the same as the people running the machines. They just have different roles in the running of the factory. There's a hierarchy of decision making. And that's what I was saying. Those people seized the means of production. They didn't destroy the means of production. Production is still happening. Yep.
They're sharing the wealth. That's the important part.
But the means of production in modernity is modernity. And you can't reject modernity and get everything else. You know what books portray a society like that? Fucking Dune. Dune is portraying a society.
Let's go.
Dune portrays a society that has decided, you know what? No machines. No modernity. We're going to make sure individual humans are the height of all power. And no structures should exist more powerful than individual human beings that remain human forever.
Until they turn into worms.
Well, I mean, why he turns into a worm, and also, the rest of the society is very angry that he turns into a worm. But I love how Dune interrogates this well, because Dune portrays a society that says this: remain human. Humanity is the peak. Let's never go beyond this point. And yet, every advanced thing that society is doing has someone secretly becoming very inhuman anyway. You got people taking crazy space drugs and turning into fish. You got people taking different crazy space bugs and turning into...
And you don't question it because it's fictional. Right?
Yep.
It's not taking place. It's not New York where the spice is flowing.
But it portrays a society that performatively rejects modernity and yet continues to use modernity. They just hide it. And this book says, no, you don't actually need the modernity.
Anyway... We got anything else to say about the...
No, I don't think so. We'll talk about it in the forum, because there are some fun bits. I did like the boat raves quite a bit. That was a fun part of the book.
The boat rave is definitely the
But you know what? Ferality, that VR furry convention.
Go to the most. Right?
That VR furry convention, pretty much, it's like that.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So.
All right. So, next book club. So, there is a genre of fiction that is extremely popular. It's huge, right? You can't miss it in the bookstore, right?
Romance?
No. And then every time I ever have experienced this genre of fiction in any medium, not just books, right? I always enjoy. I think most people actually that I know enjoy this genre of fiction. But yet, I feel, despite being so huge, right, and so popular, this genre there's a people who are like into it, like a community of people who are focused on it. And I feel like people who outside that community who would, do enjoy the genre, at least, especially for me, it's like, I just don't think about it that often, right? It's like, if only I thought about it, I would be like, oh yeah, that is a thing I really like a lot. No wonder it's really, right? And I would go for it more often. And so that's what we're going to do, right? So I went and I said, all right, let us find 2 mystery novels.
Right? I was trying to guess. Because I'm a big fan of mystery, and yeah, I haven't read it.
Right, you're a big fan of mystery, but when's the last time you went and sought out mystery as a fictional genre?
I reread. A few years ago, I reread an Agatha Christie book, but it's one with a problematic title.
You mean all of them?
Yeah, but this one is particularly problematic. But anyway, I did reread one of those. Yeah, and
so for that reason and some other reasons, I said, look, we're not going to pick like classic all-time best mystery novel because we'll end up with Agatha Christie, Sherlock Holmes kind of shit, right? Or John le Carre, who I guess I don't like, even though he's supposed to be like the best. I
did super enjoy Knives Out, and the sequel was okay.
No, yeah, I agree with that. But like, people fucking love John le Carre, and I've read Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which is supposed to be like one of the best mystery novels ever, and I'm like, meh. I don't think it's like,
well, I think the problem with it, because I remember watching the movie, the problem with it is that it was revolutionary when it came out, but it a lot of times if you read something that's early in a modern genre, after having encountered the many evolved forms of it down the road, it feels really derivative and cliche just because the tropes from it got recycled so often.
So I went and I said, all right, let's find some big hit mystery novels, right, that are recent. And I saw stuff like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and I'm like, I didn't even realize that was a mystery. I've heard of it, but I don't really want to pick something that's like ultra famous like that, right? Let's find recent hit mystery novels that are like big, but normal people probably haven't heard of them. Only mystery people.
So you're looking for one that doesn't have a movie.
Right. And so also, not super new where the judgment is still maybe out there, right? Just like a few years old. So from my I spent maybe 15 minutes searching on the internet and surveying the land. The best mystery novel that I could find of 2018 and 2019. New enough, but not super new. Right? All right. So the one from 2018 is called The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. And basically, from the description, it's about Evelyn Hardcastle is going to be murdered, right? And this person is like inhabiting different people and like seeing the story. It's like this one person, and they get to like possess or inhabit like different characters and witness the whole thing play out from different angles. Ooh. And they have to solve the mystery. Right. The other book from 2019 is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I could just read the description. Alicia Berenson's life is perfect. A famous painter married to a fashion photographer, lives in a big fancy house, perfect for a mystery novel, right? One time, right? Her husband, Gabriel, comes home late from a fashion shoot, and she shoots him 5 times in the face. But then she doesn't talk. After she commits the murder, the silent patient, right? She does not talk. She doesn't say any words. Like, forget Fifth Amendment. Like, she says nothing. And so then I get the feeling it's a little bit Silence of the Lambs. Theo Faber is a criminal psychotherapist, right? Who is trying to figure out, this silent person who shot her husband.
Ooh, this is a tough choice because on one hand, I'm a big fan of like super like psychological with a capital P thrillers. Like I love that shit. But at the same time, the other one, The 7 Deaths, I'm also a fan of the high concept, something funny's going on type of mystery like that, where there's like a concept to it. That's a really tough call.
I read one of these books completely, and the other one is waiting at the library. So I've already finished one. If you pick the one I already finished, we could do the book club soon.
I think I'm gonna pick because of research I've been doing lately. unrelated to this, around modernity and all that nonsense, I'm choosing The Silent Patient because I want a psychological
that's
thriller.
At the library. So go get though.
I feel like I'm going to read the other one at some point anyway because I was really sold on it halfway through your description. But
yeah, so the other one, having read it, I'll just say, it's really it does have something to say. It's not just fun. Can you solve it? But it really is very puzzly, right? Where it's like you're seeing, it's almost like a video game.
I thought video game vibe immediately while I was skimming the Wikipedia while you were talking about it.
But it's like, I will say, me, who always figures out everything, it's like, no, I didn't fucking anything.
But also, I've wanted to actually revisit some old John Grisham thriller novels that I read a long, long time ago. So I've been feeling like a thriller anyway. So that's what spoke to me about The Silent Patient.
All right, well, Silent Patients by Alex Michaelides is waiting for me at the library right now.
Oh, it's his debut novel.
Yeah, and it's a lot of people fucking love this book, and it's like, yeah, this woman shoots her husband in the face for no reason anyone can tell, and then completely silent afterwards, and then Silence of the Lamb type thing where the criminal psychologist tries to figure it out.
I'm into it, especially because years ago, I've seen Silence of the Lambs several times in my life. I even saw a rescreening in the theater once, but one time we were on a ski bus. And I was asleep, and we're driving home, and I'm exhausted. And they just put Silence of the Lamb on these tiny, shitty TVs in the bus.
That's the movie they picked? Okay.
Yeah, and despite the fact that I'm exhausted, and I've seen that movie 5 times, and I just want to sleep, you can't not watch that movie if it's on in your... It's such an intense movie. You end up watching it no matter what.
Listen. If you want to watch something on tiny TVs on a coach bus, here's what I recommend. I recommend that you fill your coach bus with teenage boys, right? And you watch Jerry Springer. Because I did that. And I've watched quite a few things on TVs and coach buses, but that was the most entertaining.
Me
doesn't even like to watch Jerry Springer.
On a school trip, me and a friend convinced, this was ninth grade. They did a thing where someone won, they got to pick the VHS tape to put in the thing on the trip. Me and a friend of mine that you've met won, and we picked some anime. They let that play for about 5 minutes before they're like, nope. And
was it Legend of the Overfiend? What were you watching?
It was Vampire Hunter D.
Oh, okay. But it's like, yeah, you should definitely, if it's not Jerry Springer Teenage Boys, exactly, the silly comedy movies like, Dumb and Dumber or any kind of Richard, what's his name, Pryor or anything like that is what you should go with on a coach bus during the day. At night, you shouldn't put anything on.
It just struck me how Silence of the Lambs in a distant on a screen that was basically a centimeter square from where I was sitting in my own vision is still compelling.